She dumped my belongings outside during a family party, locked the door in my face, and told everyone inside I no longer live there. I spent the night sitting on cold concrete, watching my clothes soak in the rain, while she slept comfortably inside the house that legally belonged to both of us. By morning, a court order forced that same door open. This story isn't about an argument. It's about a line being crossed, the law stepping in, and the moment someone realizes control doesn't mean ownership. Before I start, take 1 second. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and how much battery your phone has right now. Because if you've ever been pushed out, silenced, or told you had no rights, this story is for you. My name is Lena Parker. I'm 29 years old. And the night my sister decided to throw me out of my own house, she thought no one would stop her. I had just finished a late shift and drove straight home to our family party. The music was loud. Cars lined the driveway. From the outside, everything looked normal. Warm lights, laughter. The kind of house people assume is full of love. Then I turned the corner. My suitcase was lying next to the trash cans. One wheel snapped clean off. My winter coat was crumpled on the concrete, soaked in something sticky. My backpack, the one with my laptop inside, was unzipped, wide open, empty. For a second, my brain refused to accept it. I honestly thought someone had been robbed. Then I saw my name written in black marker across a cardboard box. Lena, office files. My hands started shaking. I stepped out of the car slowly, like if I moved too fast, the scene might disappear. I walked toward the front door and tried the handle. Locked. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked harder. Through the glass panel, I saw my sister standing in the hallway, arms crossed, already waiting, while I sat outside that night, wrapped in a damp coat I'd pulled from one of the boxes. My sister was telling everyone inside the same story she'd been telling for years, that the house was hers, that I was just staying temporarily, that I was dramatic, unstable, ungrateful. She'd been planting that narrative long before she ever changed the locks. What no one at that party wanted to remember was how the house actually came to exist. 5 years earlier, when our parents downsized, neither of them could qualify for a mortgage anymore. Their credit was bruised. Their income wasn't stable. The bank said no, twice. My sister didn't have savings. She'd been in and out of jobs, always between big opportunities. I was the one with the steady paycheck. I was the one who put down the money. I still remember sitting at the bank, signing papers I barely understood, my hands sweating as the loan officer slid the documents toward me. My sister sat beside me, smiling, tapping her nails like it was all a formality. "Don't worry," she'd said then. "We'll do this together." Together, apparently, meant my name on the paperwork and her name on the control. The deed had both our names. Equal ownership. Clear as day. The mortgage payments came from my account. Month after month. Quietly, reliably. When something broke, I fixed it. When taxes were due, I paid them. When she was short, I covered it. And slowly, without ever saying it out loud, she started acting like the house answered to her. She decided who could visit. She decided which room belonged to whom. She decided when I was crossing a line. By the time that party happened, she'd already moved my things out of the master bedroom once, while I was at work. She'd framed it as a misunderstanding, a mistake. Everyone told me to let it go. "She's under stress," my mother said. "You know how she is." My father added, "Just keep the peace." That night, sitting on the concrete as rainwater crept closer to my shoes, I finally understood what keeping the peace had cost me. It had taught her she could push further. Inside the house, the music eventually stopped. Cars left. Lights turned off one by one. No one came out to check on me. No one texted to ask if I was okay. My sister never reopened the door. At some point, I stopped shivering. Not because I wasn't cold, but because my mind had shifted. I wasn't thinking like a sister anymore. I was thinking like a co-owner who had just been illegally removed from her own property. When morning came, the damage was impossible to ignore. My laptop wouldn't turn on. Half my clothes smelled like wine and rain. Important documents, insurance papers, work files were warped and unreadable. I took photos of everything, every box, every stain, every broken zipper. At 8:03 a.m., I made the call. The lawyer listened quietly as I explained. He asked questions I hadn't even thought of. Did I have proof of payment? Messages? The deed? I sent everything. When he called back, his tone had changed. She crossed a serious legal line, he said. Changing the locks and removing your belongings without a court order qualifies as an illegal eviction. The words landed with a strange sense of relief. Not because I wanted revenge, but because someone finally named what had been done to me. We can file for an emergency order today, he continued. Police-assisted re-entry. She'll be required to unlock the door immediately. I looked up at the house. The curtains were drawn. The driveway was empty. It looked peaceful, untouched, like nothing wrong had ever happened there. Will she be there? I asked. If she's home, yes. I imagined her inside, making coffee, scrolling her phone, convinced she'd won, convinced the night had ended in her favor. Let's do it, I said. By 10:30 a.m., the paperwork was filed. By noon, a judge had reviewed the evidence, the deed, the payment records, the messages she'd sent daring me to stop her. By early afternoon, the order was signed. She thought locking me out would make me disappear. She didn't realize every door she slammed had been replaced with a paper trail, and the next knock on that door wouldn't be mine. The house was quiet when they arrived. Too quiet. It was early afternoon, the kind of hour where people assume nothing dramatic ever happens. I stood at the edge of the driveway with my phone in my hand, my battery down to 12%, watching a marked police car pull up behind a dark sedan with county lettering on the side. 2 officers stepped out. Calm, professional, no rush. A third man followed, the court enforcement officer, holding a thin folder like it weighed nothing. That folder carried more authority than any lock my sister had installed. Are you Lena Parker? One of the officers asked. I nodded. Yes. He glanced at the house, then back at me. You're listed as a legal co-owner on the deed. We're here to enforce an emergency court order for immediate re-entry. Hearing it said out loud made my chest tighten. Not from fear, from validation. We walked up to the front door together. I noticed the new lock immediately. Shiny, untouched, installed with confidence. The kind of lock people buy when they're sure they've won. The officer knocked. Once, firm, controlled. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. From inside, I heard movement, footsteps, a pause, the sound of someone holding their breath. The door cracked open just an inch. My sister's face appeared in the gap. Her eyes went straight to me, then to the uniforms. What is this? She demanded, already defensive. Why are the police here? The enforcement officer stepped forward and held up the folder. Ma'am, this property is jointly owned. You've been ordered by the court to provide immediate access to the co-owner you unlawfully excluded. Her face drained of color. That's not... She started, then stopped herself. She moved out. The officer didn't argue. He simply opened the folder and read. The court has determined that Ms. Parker did not vacate voluntarily and that her belongings were removed without consent. You are required to unlock the door now. Silence. Behind her, I could see the hallway. The same hallway she'd stood in the night before. Arms crossed. So certain she was untouchable. This is ridiculous, she snapped. This is a family matter. The officer met her gaze evenly. It became a legal matter when you changed the locks. She looked at me then. Really looked at me. Like she was seeing a stranger. You did this, she hissed. You called the police? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step forward. I called a lawyer, I said. This is what happens after. Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in years. She didn't have a script ready. The enforcement officer gestured toward the door. Please unlock it now, or we will proceed with forced entry. Her hands shook as she reached for the lock. Click. The sound was soft, almost disappointing. After everything, that single click didn't feel dramatic enough. But when the door swung open, something shifted. The officers stepped inside first. I followed. The house smelled like coffee and last night's food. My sister's shoes were by the door. Her jacket hung neatly on the hook, the same hook where my coat had been before it was tossed outside. I walked past her without touching her, past the living room where the party had been, past the couch where people had laughed while I sat outside in the rain. Everything looked normal, which somehow made it worse. The enforcement officer turned to her. You will not interfere with her access to the property. Any further attempts to restrict entry may result in charges. My sister tried to laugh. It came out thin. So what? She just walks back in like nothing happened? The officer didn't answer. I did. No, I said quietly. Nothing about this is like nothing happened. I went straight to my room, or what used to be my room. The door was open. The closet was half empty. Drawers pulled out. Some of my things stacked in a corner like they were waiting to be removed again. I took photos. Every drawer, every moved item, every missing piece. When I came back out, my sister was pacing, phone pressed to her ear. They're taking her side, she whispered harshly. I don't know. No. They're inside right now. Our parents arrived 20 minutes later. They walked into a house already changed. My mother's eyes widened when she saw the officers. My father froze in the doorway. This went too far, my sister said immediately. She overreacted. No one answered her, because for the first time, there was paperwork on the table that didn't care who the favorite child was. The officer finished his report and handed me a copy. You're legally back in possession, he said. If you need anything further, contact us. When they left, the house felt heavier. Not safer, heavier. My sister stood across from me, arms crossed again, but now it looked like armor she didn't quite trust. You think you've won? She said. I looked at the door, the lock she'd installed, the door she'd slammed. This wasn't about winning, I said. It was about proving you couldn't erase me. She didn't reply, because deep down, she already knew. The door had been unlocked, and so had everything else she'd tried to control once the officers left. The house didn't go back to normal. It couldn't. The silence wasn't the peaceful kind. It was thick, charged, full of things no one wanted to say out loud. My sister stayed in the living room, pacing like a caged animal, her phone glued to her hand. My parents hovered near the kitchen, whispering urgently, stealing glances at me as if I were a stranger who'd wandered in uninvited. I didn't sit down. I didn't unpack. I went straight to the dining table and laid everything out. The printed court order, the deed with both our names, the bank statements showing years of mortgage payments coming from my account. Paper doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't argue. It just exists. My sister scoffed when she saw the stack. You really want to do this in front of everyone? I wanted to live here in peace, I said. You didn't give me that option. My mother reached for one of the papers, her fingers trembling. She read the first page, then the second. Her face slowly changed, not into anger, but into something closer to panic. This says, she began, then stopped, that I'm not a guest. I finished for her. And I never was. My father cleared his throat. Why didn't you tell us it was this serious? I looked at him. I tried, I said. Every time she moved my things, every time she spoke for me, every time she told me to let it go, my sister laughed sharply. You're exaggerating. This is just paperwork drama. I slid my phone across the table. On the screen were the photos from the morning. My clothes soaked and stained, my broken suitcase, the open laptop bag. "This is damage to my property," I said. "And this," I tapped the court order, "means you're legally responsible." Her smile faltered. "You wouldn't," she said quietly. "You wouldn't do that to family." I met her eyes. "You did it first." The words landed harder than I expected. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my mother sat down. Not slowly, not gracefully. She sat like her legs had given out. "I didn't know," she whispered. I didn't answer, because knowing had never stopped any of them before. The enforcement report arrived by email that evening. It documented the lock change, the forced exclusion, the condition of my belongings. The officer's neutral language carried weight. My family's excuses never had. 2 days later, my sister received formal notice. She owed compensation for damaged property. She was barred from changing locks or interfering with access again. Any violation would escalate to charges. She exploded. She slammed doors, threw accusations, claimed I was ruining the family, that I was humiliating her on purpose, that I'd always been jealous. I let her talk, because something inside me had shifted. I wasn't defending myself anymore. I was documenting. Every message she sent after that went into a folder. Every raised voice became a timestamp. Every attempt to rewrite reality failed against the record she couldn't control. My parents tried to negotiate. "Maybe you can both just, let's calm down and reset." She didn't mean it like that. I listened. Then I stood up. "There is no reset," I said. "There are boundaries now." I told them my conditions. Locks would be changed. With my approval, rooms would be clearly divided. No moving my belongings. No speaking on my behalf. All financial matters documented in writing. My sister stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "You can't do this," she said. "This is my home." I slid the deed back into its folder. "This is our home," I corrected. "And if that's a problem, we can sell it." The word sell hit her harder than any accusation. She went quiet, because she knew she couldn't afford it alone. That night, I slept inside the house again. Not comfortably, not peacefully, but securely. The door was locked from the inside, and this time, the key was in my hand. Lying there, staring at the ceiling, I realized something that surprised me. The court order hadn't just unlocked the door. It had stripped away every illusion she'd been hiding behind. And in the days that followed, she would learn something else. Control doesn't survive sunlight, and paperwork doesn't forget. 3 weeks later, the house no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like a decision waiting to be made. My sister avoided me when she could. When she couldn't, she stayed quiet. A sharp contrast to the woman who once spoke over me, for me, about me. The rules were written now, not implied, not emotional, written. And she hated that most of all. The locksmith came on a Tuesday morning. I stood beside him while he worked, watching the old locks come off one by one. Not because I didn't trust him, but because this time, I wanted to witness the change myself. When he handed me the new keys, they felt heavier than metal. They felt earned. My sister watched from the hallway, arms folded tight against her chest. "So that's it?" she said. "You're just taking over?" I didn't look at her. "I'm securing what's mine." Later that afternoon, I met with a real estate agent. Not secretly, not dramatically. Professionally, I laid the deed on the table and explained the situation in simple terms. Joint ownership, irreconcilable conflict, forced removal, court documentation. She didn't flinch. "I've seen this before," she said. "You have options." Selling the house was one of them. Buying her out was another. Letting her buy me out. Unlikely, but legally possible. That evening, I presented those options to my family. We sat around the same dining table where, weeks earlier, my papers had stunned them into silence. This time, I spoke first. "I'm not staying like this," I said. "This house will not be another place where I'm tolerated instead of respected." My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. My father nodded slowly, as if he already knew this moment was coming. My sister laughed, short and bitter. You think you can just walk away? I met her eyes. I think I can choose. That was the difference. 2 days later, she tried to bargain. Then she tried to guilt me. Then she tried anger again. None of it worked. Because for the first time, I wasn't asking permission to exist. She couldn't afford the house on her own. She never had. The numbers made that painfully clear. When the agent spelled it out. When the bank statements were laid bare. The truth settled in like dust after a collapse. She signed, not because she wanted to, because she had no leverage left. The sale moved quickly, faster than anyone expected. The market was right, the paperwork clean, the court order still fresh enough to discourage any last-minute games. On the day I moved out for the final time, I didn't rush. I packed carefully. I took what mattered. I left nothing I needed to explain. At the door, my sister stood watching again. The same place she'd stood when she thought she could erase me with a lock and a lie. She didn't speak. Neither did I. I walked out with my boxes, closed the door behind me, and handed the keys to the agent waiting by the car. That door closed without anger, without shouting, without regret. Weeks later, the money hit my account. Enough to start over, enough to breathe, enough to choose peace. I moved into a smaller place across town, quiet, sunlit, no shared walls of history. The first night there, I sat on the floor with my phone plugged in, battery at 100%, and felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Safety, not because of locks, but because of boundaries? My family still talks about that night like it was a misunderstanding, a moment that got out of hand. I don't correct them anymore, because I don't live inside their version of the story. I live inside the life I rebuilt after it. My sister thought throwing my belongings outside would teach me my place. She was right about one thing. It did. It taught me I never belonged behind that door in the first place. And the moment it closed on me was the moment everything finally opened. A month after the sale closed, my phone started ringing again. Not from my sister, from relatives, aunts who hadn't spoken to me in years, cousins who had watched silently the night I was locked out. People who suddenly wanted to check in and understand what really happened. I listened. I didn't explain, because the truth had already done its work without my voice. The story they'd been told, that I was dramatic, difficult, temporary, didn't survive contact with paperwork, police reports, and a court order. It never does. My sister moved into a small apartment on the edge of town. I heard she told people she let me win to keep the peace, that she was tired of fighting, that she took the high road. I smiled when I heard that, not because it was true, but because she finally understood what losing control feels like. My parents came by my new place once. They stood awkwardly in the doorway, holding a bag of groceries like an offering. My mother looked around at the clean walls, the quiet, the absence of tension. You seem different, she said. I am, I replied. She asked if we could move forward, if I could forgive, if I could stop holding on to the past. I didn't argue. I just told her the truth. I'm not holding on to it, I said. I set it down. They left shortly after. That night, I sat alone on my couch and thought about the version of myself who had slept on concrete in the rain, surrounded by boxes labeled like she was disposable. That woman didn't know yet that she was standing at the exact point where her life would turn. Not because someone saved her, but because she chose not to disappear. People ask me now if I regret calling a lawyer instead of trying to talk it out. If I wish I'd handled it more softly. I don't, because softness had been demanded of me my entire life, and it never protected me. Clarity did. Boundaries did. The law did. I still think about that door sometimes. The sound of the lock clicking shut. The sound of it opening again. One was meant to humiliate me. The other reminded me who I was. If you're listening to this and you've ever been told to keep the peace while someone takes your space, your voice, or your rights, Hear this clearly. You are not dramatic for refusing to be erased. You are not cruel for choosing protection over permission. And you are never wrong for stepping out of a place that only wants you quiet. There was a message I typed a dozen times and never sent. It sat in my notes app for weeks. Rewritten late at night. Deleted in the morning. Rewritten again when something small reminded me of the house. A creaking stair. The smell of coffee. The way silence used to feel like punishment. It wasn't angry. That surprised me. It was calm, clear, final. It said, "I didn't call the lawyer to hurt you. I called because I was done shrinking so you could feel tall. I didn't leave to punish the family. I left because I finally chose myself. I never sent it because I realized something important. People who need control don't want explanations. They want access. And I was done giving that away." Life didn't become perfect after that. Some nights were still lonely. Some holidays were still quiet. Some family photos still felt like evidence of a life I no longer fit into. But something else changed. When I walk into my apartment now, I don't brace myself. When my phone buzzes, my stomach doesn't drop. When someone disagrees with me, I don't immediately assume I'm wrong. That's what safety really is. Not locks, not police, not court orders. Safety is knowing that if someone tries to push you out of your own life again, you won't beg to be let back in. You'll walk away with your head up. Sometimes people ask how my sister and I are now. The answer is simple. We're distant. And for the first time, that distance feels healthy. She still tells the story her way. I don't correct it, because my life doesn't need her version anymore. If you stayed until this point, thank you. And before you scroll away, one last thing. Leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from and how much battery your phone has left. Not because I need to know, but because stories like this remind us we're not listening alone. And if you ever find yourself standing outside a door someone locked to make you feel small, remember this. You don't need to be let back in. Sometimes, the strongest move is choosing a door that was never locked to begin with.